to The Found Cause. We're found our cause and serve the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm Michael, the man behind the machine, and to my right, your left is...
Sebastian, the archivist.
And to our right is...
Theodore, under the PC, under the person of Christ.
We're doing like a marathon of episodes, in case you're wondering why we look the exact same, sound the exact same. So forgive us for a little rustiness.
We've worn the same clothes for a week. I'm just kidding.
It's been a rough week. Today's episode is another shorter, just like last week's post. This one is on Sebastian's European vacation. If you don't know about Sebastian, I'll give him a brief intro. Sebastian is a man of many Renaissance pursuits, including several languages under your belt. Not only Koine Greek, you've also got Spanish, your native language, English, but basically native language now, native Peruvian, also Native American, i.e. in America,
yes.
Native here, like me. And you have a little Russian, a little Chinese, a little Turkish.
A lot of Italian and French.
Danish.
And Danish.
Anyways, man of many language pursuits, but also a traveler. You went to Istanbul during COVID. Brave.
That was fun.
Like the only country's open, you said?
Yes.
You just went with your family on a 2-week tour of Middle Europe?
Middle Europa, as
Yeah.
some might say. Yes, Central Europe.
And my 2 cents on this, I don't care about Europe at all. I'm a true red-blooded American in that I don't care about anything but the Culver's next door. You know, I'm all about McDonald's. So does Europe have McDonald's?
They do.
They do, but not as good as here. So I don't care about Europe. But what I do care about is like generally world events, and also a lot of the critiques we get out to online from Catholics, from Eastern Orthodox, from these days from like weird statists that are like, trust me, I'm a red-blooded American, emphasis on red, and that I also vote conservatively in the U.S. elections. But there are some like quote-unquote conservatives that are like honestly racist, which most accusations of racism are very overblown and stupid, right? So like I don't say that lightly, but there are some like actual racists that are getting out there against the Jews who, like, you know, we've reacted to rabbis in this podcast before and how horrible their arguments are. Certainly don't believe the Jews are right about Christ, and we don't believe they're going to heaven by fiat, so we're not dispensationalists of any sort. But the rampant anti-Semitism that is occurring on some places on the quote-unquote right is also advocating for like state persecution of heresies without proper safeguards. We would call that sacralism, just like handing the keys to the sword against the church to the state and saying like, have at it, we trust you guys, instead of like giving some sort of safeguards around the state. It's just like go cut them down, boss. And you know, that has been the natural state of Europe for 1,000+ years. And so
Because it only worked so well for them.
it worked so well. I mean, you know, it worked to a certain extent, but like so did monarchy, and like I don't think we shouldn't have, same group advocates for monarchs, but like I don't think we should advocate for monarchy because, you know, it can work, but it's not the best system. Feudalism can work, it's just not the best system. And so in that way, I think it's interesting to see, okay, these are the countries that did do sacralism, they did do this state church thing, and whether Protestant or Catholic. And then of course Catholics talk about how great Catholicism is. What are the fruits of the Catholic Church? Like, I'm looking around and you see the countries that are mostly Catholic, and I haven't been there. You know, there's some gravitas you get for being there, but a bit of chili. They are not good. Their fruits are not good. You know,
Modern day, by the way, clarifying modern way before anyone spams the comments.
Since the split of Protestants and Catholics. And in the same time, the Catholics that you see fruit from typically seem to be in Protestant countries. Think in America. So that's it, or maybe England. That seems interesting, doesn't it? Anyways, we got an on-the-ground reporter, Sebastian, to give us a little taste of his trip, but also a little taste of the current state of the church and government in Middle Europe, in Central Europe. That's my giant preamble. Take it away, Sebastian.
It was a blast. Highly recommend. I was very blown away, not expecting it, by Budapest. Very beautiful place. And if you ever get the chance to go, your viewer, take it, because you will not be disappointed. Can only sing praises of Hungary, and I'm not Hungarian, or anyone that I know in my life is Hungarian. So go, very beautiful. And on the note of the state churches that we're talking about, I'm just I subconsciously realized these are all territories of the old Habsburg Empire. Czechia, Austria, Hungary, and Slovakia. I understand there's more, but those the ones that I went to. Those are the heartland of the Austrian Empire, and I was a little bit underwhelmed by Vienna. I was expecting more, considering it was supposed to be the capital of an empire.
I think some people would call it the capital of Europe at the time.
Yes. Yeah. I expected more. So it's beautiful. It's not okay. It's not bad. It's good. It's beautiful. It's pretty. I was just expecting a little bit more, but that's just my personal opinion. Okay. That was on the touristy side. I also went to a nice vineyard. You know, I love a good wine, so that was incredible. Now to spiritual matters, because I also keep a keen eye out for that. Landed in Prague and went down immediately to Salzburg and stayed over in Bavaria in Germany for 1 night. I was surprised by the strong influence on the daily life of Catholicism in regular people.
I ask a question. Maybe this is a comedic break, but just kidding. I'm very interested. But you said, so Salzburg and Bavaria. Is that where Salisbury steaks come from and Bavarian cream donuts?
I think Salisbury's from Salisbury, England. Yeah, Bavarian donuts are from Bavaria, though.
They are indeed.
Okay. I like
Good comedic break. Salisbury steaks is like an English thing. Yeah, I mean, kind of seems German, though. I could believe it.
Schnitzels come from that part of the world. Oh my goodness, I did not know there were so many kinds of schnitzels, and they don't eat tiny schnitzels. It's like a whole bed sheet size of schnitzel. That's pretty good.
Oh my goodness.
Highly recommend. Delicious food. Anyway, back to the place that we were staying in. I was surprised by the amount of Catholic paraphernalia that was everywhere, in the restaurant, in the hotel, not the rooms, but like in the hallways, and just in random buildings. You would see crucifixes, statues of Mary, and icons of saints, Joseph, icons of Jesus, Mary, etc. Catholic images everywhere. And it almost felt as much as in the church. And to me, even growing up in Peru, in which there's a strong Catholic influence, I had never seen so many Catholic symbols, statues, images outside of a church.
And maybe for those who don't know, why might that be? Like, why would Austria be so Catholic-y?
Yes, because when the Reformation was kicking up at full steam, I did not know this, most of Austria, the populace, not the monarchy, the population became Lutheran. Same with Bohemia, like where the Hussites were, they kind of joined in with the Reformation.
Modern day Czech Republic.
Yeah, thank you, yeah. Moravia too, the Moravian Church from Czech Republic as well. Slovakia, Hungary, they were Calvinist, so majority Calvinist in those parts. But then the Habsburg monarchy thought of probably need to bring these people back in line. So through the Counter-Reformation after the Council of Trent, 1545, they instituted a crackdown on Lutheranism and force converted back the population to Catholicism in Bavaria especially, and then in the heartland of Austria, which is where the Habsburgs were. Their seat of power. So that's why you normally would identify Bavaria and Austria as very strong Catholic regions. But again, I thought Peru and Mexico were very Catholic. Probably these people take it to a whole new level. Even a restaurant has statues everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. I mean as much as a Catholic church. And I was truly surprised when I saw that. Okay. That being said, Matt, you're sitting down, dining, and you're surrounded by statues of saints everywhere looking at you eat. You would think all these people love Yahweh, go to Mass every week, talk about God openly in the streets, which, by the way, Europeans don't do. They hate that. Anywhere in Europe, do not talk about religion. They're like, please, Americans, please stop it. Like, no, you Southerners love to talk about God and Jesus. Please, no, we hate talking about Christ. Okay, it's bad. Shame on you, but that's a taboo in Europe.
Pretty honest, you know, God haters.
Yes,
hating God.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah. You would think Austria would be like I don't know, the south of Europe.
It is southern.
Yeah. However, to my surprise, when we go to churches there, even during the weekends, I was gone for 2 weeks, and they were mostly empty. And then to my surprise, at least I'm consistently seeing statistics that church attendance in Austria is between 3 to 4%. I've seen numbers that go around 10%, but still, like the number I'm seeing consistently is that 3 to 4% of the population attend weekly mass. It's like, what? What are you doing? Put the
Actually,
go ahead.
Sorry. Regarding these stats, did these come before COVID or after COVID?
It's from 2021, 2022.
So in COVID,
Yeah.
kind of harsh.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Harsh time to judge.
I suppose, but still.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, definitely COVID has had an effect on like people thinking that it seems okay for me to just stay home and do my own research and believe my own things and not meet together with anyone. But obviously then if they're not reading the Bible, if they're not in the scripture, and if they're not holding themselves accountable with fellow believers, then they're completely missing where Jesus says to abide in him. And what is Christ's body? Christ's body is the church, which is the people, and the writer of Hebrews 10:25, orders do not forsake meeting together. So, yeah. Regardless, yeah, these low church attendance stats, that's not good to hear.
Yeah, and even if you go with a more generous number, 15% that I'm seeing, probably before and after, I hope, before and after COVID, it's doubly damning for Catholics because last time I checked, don't you have to receive the Eucharist to have your sins forgiven?
Yeah, it's like unlike Protestants, they ultra emphasize going to church, even more than just the Hebrews quote right there, right? You could lose salvation should you not.
Yes, and I was like, what are you doing? Put those icons to good use. Like, what are you hoarding all these statues of Mary and Jesus if you're not even going to church? So that was surprising. So probably a lot of people might not notice that, but to me, we're in a Christian channel. That really took me back. And they have beautiful cathedrals. They have all these wonderful places of worship that Redeemed Sumer would love to just get a hold of and put some Protestants in there. And they're not using it. What are they doing? So that was Austria. We're going to focus now again on the spiritual sense. Hungary, schizophrenic countries, I like to call it, because pretty much half the continent, geographically half is Catholic and the other half is Calvinist. Again, effect of the Counter-Reformation. It has one of the highest church attendance, ranging between 17 to 20%. For reference, according to what we saw before recording, the U.S. has between 30 to 40% weekly church attendance.
COVID also smashed the U.S., but it's returned pretty rip-roaringly. So there's a bajillion stats you can get on this. But some would say that during COVID, 5% of people still attended, which is pretty good. Not that good, but good for COVID. And now it's back maybe to 20 to 30. So yeah, but still, it's the highest, probably in the world, percentage-wise.
Yeah, and Hungary is supposed to be a religious country in Europe. They get a bad rap in the EU for being super conservative, super traditional, super religious, and less than 20% of the people are going to church weekly. Again, what are you doing? What are you putting all these cathedrals for? And then last time I checked, Catholics require you to go and receive the Eucharist. That's Hungary. Slovakia. Country that was unfortunately hard hit by communism, so
was Hungary for the record, but yes.
I suppose. So, and very, very gray. The castle in Bratislava was beautiful, right over the city. A very small, compact city, so easy to walk, easy to navigate. But outside of that, the suburbs, you can clearly see influenced by communism. So, but I think they have beautiful castles, but you can still see the remnants of the Soviet era in that country, which also affected Czechia. Czechia, I mentioned, homeland of Jan Hus, the reformer before Luther in the 1400s. Hussites used to be, and Protestants, Lutherans, mixture of all of these used to be the majority population in these countries until the Habsburgs sent in the Jesuits to either kill, convert, and or all the above to those people. And now they are the most atheist country, also influenced by communism. They're the most atheist country in Europe. I'm pretty sure it's around 70-80% of the people identify as non-believers.
Which is crazy high, for the record.
Yeah. 10% Catholic, and then the rest Protestants and Buddhists and whatever else is there in religion. So that was sad because I thought Prague was a beautiful city. You can see the Christian legacy there. I was deeply moved by the history from Jan Hus. I went to Bethlehem Chapel. Just incredible just to see this. Understand it's rebuilt because it's not identical to how it was back in the day. Very touching to see the place where Jan Hus would preach, and he was the reformer before Martin Luther. So in that sense, for me, it was very that was my favorite part of the trip. I would say for me, like in a spiritual sense, in Prague. But very few people go to church too. Like very low numbers still. If only 10% of the population identifies as Catholic, then very few people go. 3 to 5% is what I'm seeing as well.
Maybe they need to up their coffee and donuts budget. More people in the doors.
That's how you do it. There's only one way: laser light shows and coffee. I think it's so interesting. So obviously we already know this. These stats, bro. You didn't have to go there to see these stats, but it is interesting to like be reminded of these stats. And it goes back to, I guess this is a different episode, so I'm referencing a different episode, but it goes back to you should know them by their fruits. And like there's a lot of bad fruit that comes out of sinful countries, the United States included. The United States has plenty of sin. You have plenty of sin, lots of people, so lots of sin. And you look at the U.S. and a lot of people point out, a lot of Catholics or others, Europeans often, point out the heresies that have come out of the U.S., Mormonism or prosperity gospel or whatever, many cult Jehovah's Witnesses, or just like general bad practice, uneducated Americans. And yet, like, I don't know that Americans will always have this title, but for now, like, still one of the more religious countries on earth, especially of the West. And I think the most interesting thing about the United States being religious still is that we have been hit hard by secularism just like everybody else. Like secularism was not delayed in hitting the United States. It hit us exactly when it hit England, Germany, Austria, Czechia, everywhere. Secularism hit us at the exact same time. And yet we haven't had this gigantic splurge of death that happens to clearly the Austrian church, the Hungarian church, the Czechian church, the Slovakian church, the French church, the German church, the English church. Like all of these nations were hit extremely hard by this new religion takeover of secularism, right? Hit the US too. Obviously it dropped our religious, even nominal religious numbers, maybe true religious adherent numbers to much lower levels than they used to be. Of course, they used to be like 80%, 90%. However, these countries like Catholicism and state churches, I should say, so not even just Catholicism, but state-run Lutheran churches, Hussite churches, Reformed churches in Hungary, did not weather secularism. They have been absolutely gutted by secularism, and it's been a while. Secularism entered the European and American ecosystem in like the 1880s, and so it took a bit to catch on, like 30 years to catch on, but in 30 years, like secularism really was starting to break down churches already, and that's like in the 1910s, 1920s. Like that's how easily secularism invaded all of our countries. And of course, it's only ramped up. We think about the 1960s being a super secular time. It's when a ton of people decided that they didn't need to go to church anymore because it wasn't socially taboo to not go to church. And we see the fruit of it. And so we see the fruit of state religion in Europe, all over, all the bones of old Christianity there. And I think, moreover, you see the fruit of Catholicism and bad religion there. Not only was it state, but it was also a state bad religion. 3% attendance in Austria, 0% attendance in Czechia. I don't know what you said.
Pretty much, yes.
That's the fruit of that kind of philosophy. And so I think some state church adherents would say, okay, well, forget the Roman church because obviously they have done things poorly, but think of the good old boys, the big beardos, the Eastern Orthodox, the Coptics, the people who have been under Muslim persecution for years and are hard men, and they're rippling biceps and strong domineering personalities, they have held true to the faith. And you think, okay, Greece or someplace that's like very Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. I don't know the stats, maybe we can pull them up, but their church attendance, I'm sure, is higher than Hungary's. I'm sure it's higher than Austria's. But the thing is, secularism hit them about 60, 70 years after it hit the rest of Europe, because they were still part of the Ottoman Empire. They had a gigantic patriotism swing when they got free of the Turk, free of Muslim rule, right? And so when they did, they obviously were making Eastern Orthodoxy to be a big part of their patriotism and nationality, and that caused them really to avoid secularism for a good 60, 70 years. And it hit them in like the 70s when it hit, in the 1970s, when it hit the rest of Europe in the 1870s. And so they are drastically declining. 27% of Greeks regularly attended church. And so even with a 60-year lag, they're still absolutely getting decimated. Maybe, honestly, it may turn out that they even more so get devastated by secularism than the Western countries did. And so state church and fake religion really don't stand up well against any strong opposition. And strong opposition in these days is secularism. But, you know, it could have been anything that devastated fake religion. And, yeah, I think it stands as a testament. You know them by their fruits. Their fruits are gross.
And you've seen the current we've done reactions to some Eastern Orthodox preachers, and the Patriarch of Constantinople pretty much saying, yeah, Christians and Muslims, they worship the same God.
Yep.
Such strong, muscular, bearded leadership.
Very strong, very muscular.
But very bearded.
Very bearded. I know I've taken up a lot of this conversation, but any questions from you, Theodore, or any further comments, Sebastian, on your tour of the shadow skeleton of Europe?
The literal skeletons, yes. There was this monastery, part of now Kutna-Hora, a featured city in one of my favorite games, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, in which some insane person had the brilliant idea of reorganizing all the bones in the ossuary there and make them like a pyramid of skeletons, and then grab some like femurs, hands, different parts, different bones, parts of the body, and like how you set up Christmas. Is it garlands when you hang them from the ceiling and then they hang like this, right?
Yep.
Yeah, just bones hanging everywhere, like decor, making crowns for the skulls, like with hands, so it looks like a halo. You see also many Eastern Orthodox churches in the east, in Romania and Bulgaria, also state churches, by the way. And I suppose the logic behind it is that the bones of saints would be vessels to channel the energies of God into the physical realm. So if you have all these bones and you go there, well, you can experience the graces of God more fully in these places.
And there's always an excuse, but like, we know what this is. It's like weird pagan practices that somebody had wanted the excuse to do, and so they made up an excuse to do it.
Yeah, so
Weird.
The literal skeleton leftovers of the religion in Czechia.
Yeah. And I think what's also cool is that on the flip side of all this, hating on Europe, clearly Europe has many years of more or less faithful adherence to Christianity, and less credit to them and all credit to God instead, because God decided to bless the West with a lot of Christianity first and early and prolifically. And so you do see the fruit of Christendom, some would say, but like the fruit of many years of God's favor on these people, God's blessing on them through belief in him, right? His blessing of them with faith in him. In some of the magnificent buildings and institutions, and obviously wealth and population that Europe has grown. And so some Eastern Orthodox or state church advocates or Catholics would point to like Notre Dame or these magnificent cathedrals you were talking about in Vienna, or the general milieu and culture of Europe, and say these are the fruits of Roman Catholicism, or the fruits of Eastern Orthodoxy in the case of the large buildings that are similar in the East.
The Hagia Sophia, which has been conquered by Muslims, yes, that one.
Right, so large works. And then say these are the fruits of true Christianity, and like look at the sad megachurch that you built in the middle of Missouri. That's the fruit of Protestantism. And I don't argue that those are some magnificent works, But are they the fruit of Roman Catholicism, or are they the fruit of your forefathers? And ever since you have rejected the gospel, haven't you stopped doing such good works? Um, Again, I would argue that the huge momentum built up by faithfulness to God, that God is merciful, he says, to 1,000 generations on those who are faithful to him, and enacts the punishment for wicked on 4 generations. So he does, like, the momentum of wickedness does have some momentum in it, but God is faithful to cut it pretty short, whereas the momentum of righteousness pushes a long way, even through wicked generations. And so it is interesting to see the momentum of righteous generations of God's gifting on Europe, to see these magnificent cathedrals, and the fact that society is still standing in these places that have so utterly rejected him for years, where, like, rejection of God should eventually destroy a society, right? We see it in riots in LA, we see it in riots in Europe, like we see the fruit of secularism appearing everywhere, but God is gracious to cut it short and to keep the momentum of righteousness at least holding these societies together. And so it's a little bit of like, oh, look how gross and hollowed out these institutions have become, but also some hope in that these institutions were grown because of God's giftings. And so we should all the more have hope in what God could build on this earth, but of course in the next life to come.
So what you're saying is there is hope for that mall church in Missouri that could become the next cathedral, like that one in Prague.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the fruit of God's graciousness on America will last longer than Americans are faithful to God. And we do see America, whether it's a cycle or it is a longer series of decline and turning away from God, we definitely see America growing more and more secular. And so I don't expect us to be blessed forever, but you do see some momentum of God's righteousness on the U.S., and that despite massive apostasy in the U.S., we still have many blessings, right? We're still, by most accounts, the best country in the world, which, again, it's not to say we're like inherently always going to be that way. It's just the fruit of a lot of momentum from God's graciousness on us.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And it's supposed to end in a positive note, unless you have anything else to add, that if you are a Christian, do go to these places so that you can see, yes, I understand there's some sad people that are running the show today in these countries, but if you enjoy church history, if you read it, or you're curious, or even if you don't care, but you care about Christianity, it is good to see, as you're saying, the works of previous Christian generations that were faithful, that were pouring out into their communities, and also wanted to leave over time a legacy that would remain long after them, meaning the cathedrals, meaning all the investments that they had in the city to make the community stable and prosperous. So if you have the opportunity to go, definitely go. Hit me up if you want any recommendations for places. So I'm always willing and able to give any recommendations.
All right. Any last closing comments, Theodore? Or are we good to wrap?
Well, I just had a little response for people who would say that Christians and Muslims worship the same God, but we don't need to have that in here unless you want me to.
Put it at the end. You haven't talked that much. Put it at the end here.
Okay. So a Christian could reply to a person who says that, saying, oh, so Muslims worship Jesus now? Because obviously, Jesus takes the attributes of God. Jesus is the Alpha and Omega. Jesus shares glory with the Father. Jesus forgives sins and heals the sick. Jesus has life in himself and gives eternal life. And the Father has entrusted all judgment to the Son. And the Son judges all the nations on his glorious throne. So do Muslims worship Jesus? If Muslims worship Jesus, then I guess we worship the same God. But I don't think they worship him.
They obviously don't. Yes, the Patriarch of Constantinople, or any of these patriarchs who so compromise on faith, it's so obviously not Christian. Those adherents should be ashamed to have such a patriarch, and typically they aren't. Even adherents who would say, yeah, absolutely, we don't worship the Muslim God. Obviously, we don't, and Muslims don't worship the Christian God. They, for whatever reason, they refuse to be ashamed of their viciously awful leadership. Where I will be ashamed of bad statements that Tim Keller made. You know, he's in our camp, he's in the Reformed Protestant camp, and like, I'm not going to hold him for bad points. You know, he's just another Christian. I'm going to back him up where he's worth being backed up, and not when he's not. So yes, it is disturbing to see so many Eastern Orthodox supposedly they are faithful, but they aren't even faithful to like the most basic tenets of orthodoxy. All right, well, Thanks for listening. We have been the Found Cause. And we found our cause in the Lord Jesus Christ. I've been Michael, the man behind the machine. And to my right, your left has been
Sebastian, the archivist.
And to our right on the screen, it's been
Theodore, under the PC.
You can find us on Facebook and YouTube to see our lovely faces. We're also on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you might find your podcast. You can download all of our audio episodes on foundcause.podbean.com. Leave us a comment, leave us a like, subscribe. Our comment section has been on fire. I doubt this episode will get a ton of comments, but maybe you're hardcore check-in and you want to defend the fact that you're super religious and super awesome. Put it in the comments, man. We'll probably have a discussion.
Or you want some travel recommendations.
Or you want to travel. Honestly, if your comment is interesting enough, it's going to be a great time. If it's not that interesting, I'll just give it a thumbs up and like and show you that I read it. Thanks for listening. When we tune in next time, we talk about something completely different. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.